Hello, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Quinones. I am a 24-year-old college student here at Texas Tech. I'm a university studies major with concentrations in organizational leadership, media strategies, and landscape architecture. My research paper is essentially about the negative effects of like robust urban growth on the working poor in America's cities and how it relates to the disciplines of sociology, urban planning, and the subdiscipline of urban economics. So the goal here was just to analyze the equitable growth of cities in three different categories: affordable housing, access to educational opportunities, and access to high paying jobs for low skilled labor. Um, as more people continue to move into cities all across the world, urbanization um, and its predominantly American counterpart, suburbanization, will inevitably bring to light the many socioeconomic issues many cities and states will face in the coming decades. So the goal here is just to construct a more comprehensive understanding of the social ills that many of the nation's cities will address as urban growth and urban sprawl continue at a rapid pace. So the first relevant disciplines um, that I identified for the starting of this research was sociology, urban planning, microeconomics, criminology, and political science. But due to the comparative insights uh, of the most relevant disciplines, I decided to only go with sociology, urban planning, and the subfield of urban economics. And so the goal here was just to look at the problem of income inequality and poverty in large, rapidly growing cities from different perspectives. Um, but urban economics and urban planning and sociology actually overlap quite well together because they all have the same theories that come from very similar sources. So they all kind of overlap and um, you're able to get a better understanding of what the actual problem is. And so after doing a lot of reading and looking at different conflicting theories and insights of all the disciplines, I was able to um, look at the problem of affordable housing, um, access to educational opportunities, and high-paying jobs for low-skilled labor uh, through a different perspective, as the other um, theories that were presented for this type of research before really didn't give an adequate basis for understanding of the problem and how interdisciplinary and multi-layered this problem actually is. And so a lot of the theories were essentially saying that more or less there was um, only segregation within the cities is the problem, whereas other researchers were saying that it's about the cultural environment that a lot of people are in, and therefore uh, it doesn't matter necessarily what part of the city that you live in. You can be exposed to high crime rates and high poverty simply because the neighborhood you live in um, isn't a good neighborhood, and so it can vary all over the city, and things of that nature can make it hard for people to move up out of poverty. Um, and then I also did a lot of research into single family zoning laws, which in certain areas single family zoning is needed because it allows for more affordable housing to be built. But then in other areas, single family zoning laws actually create a economic disparity where the price per square foot increases as wages increase, and so it might not be always beneficial for some people who live in the inner city to move out to the suburbs because as jobs and money follows jobs and people and the money that come with it follow that type of urban growth, the housing prices can increase, and some people may face discrimination simply because they don't make enough money to live in certain areas. So other research was showing that commute times from traveling from the suburb areas to the inner city are actually longer than traveling from the inner city to the suburbs, and so that type of commute times and urban growth can affect people who may be living paycheck to paycheck, and maybe they're relying on a car. They have to rely on a car more than they did if they lived in the inner city where there's probably more access to public transportation. And then I also looked at the schools, public schools, inner city schools versus suburban schools, and it turns out that there's not really too much, depending on, there is some conflicting insights there. Some researchers believe that the conflict there is because of residential segregation, but there's also other evidence that shows that the reason why certain schools do better than others is simply because of the community environment and the class composition of the students that go there. And so it's not necessarily always based upon race, but it is definitely, it could be based upon simply how many people actually go to that school who come from good home environments and come from good cultural environments, whereas if they don't, they could more or less be in a situation where their educational attainment isn't going to be as high. And the dominant theory in sociology for that is called social disorganization theory, where that was developed primarily in the 40s, where researchers were asking the questions of why is it that certain communities tend to be more poverty-stricken than others. This is a notion of spatially concentrated poverty, and so what the research concluded was that because of the dysfunctional nature of certain neighborhoods and certain institutions not being very prevalent, civic organizations, religious institutions, dysfunctional families, things of that nature, that's the reason why that there's a lot of concentrated poverty in those areas, and that type of phenomena can happen in any part of the city. It's not just in the inner city, it can happen in the suburbs as well. And so there are some conflicting insights and theories between that type of theory and critical race theory, which is the other theory that says that spatially concentrated poverty is only based upon residential and racial segregation. For the most part, a lot of this research is just qualitative research. It's not quantitative research, and so there would have to be more research to actually nail down the numbers on this type of research. But what some researchers have shown is that the growth in the suburbs can actually help lower income people have homes because the houses are more affordable. So I think it really depends on the policies of the city government of where you live. In certain areas, the zoning laws and the regulations is what is causing certain housing tracts in suburban areas to be more expensive than others. Primarily in the Sun Belt, area, which is where a good amount of this research was conducted. So, like in Alabama, there was two case studies of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama. Um, there was a good amount of what is called urban sprawl, which is the building of suburbs outside of the city. And this type of research showed that more affordable housing, that the reason why the city continues to grow that way is because highways are getting built and more people are drawn to those areas because of the affordable housing and access to good jobs. And so at the end of the day, uh, urban sprawl and urban growth can have a negative effect on the working poor, but it can also have benefits as well. So it just really depends on the actual environment of the city that you're living in.